In the 2016 presidential debate, there were no questions about climate change, which is, shocking. Do you think environmentalists don't vote because they don't feel there is a candidate that cares about climate change? Like if there were candidates, would they be more likely to vote?
So it's a great question. And first, because you bring up a really interesting data point there, Nancy, I can't let that go without comment. You're absolutely right. There were zero questions about climate change in the 2016 presidential debate. And you know why? Heading into the 2016 presidential election, when you polled likely voters, only 2% of them listed climate or the environment as their top priority. And so I know why none of the candidates or debate moderators or media wanted to talk about climate change. It's because voters weren't demanding it. I mean, who on earth would ever supply any product when the marketplace isn't demanding it? In the 2016 presidential election, voters did not want politicians to talk about climate change, so they didn't. But here's the thing. The reason why voters didn't list climate or the environment as a top priority is because all of the people who cared about the environment were sitting at home. They weren't voting. Our research shows that 10.1 million already registered to vote environmentalists sat out the 2016 presidential election. 10.1 million in an election that was decided by 77,000 votes in 3 states. So to get to your question, are some of them maybe not voting because they don't see politicians talking about their issues? Yes, when we do some research, we hear people saying that. But I want to be clear, Nancy, I don't want to overstress that, because the truth is, when you poll people who do vote, when you poll people who vote all the time, even for library trustee and city council, they also think that politicians don't talk about the issues that they care about. And so I think we need to be careful about trying to discern whether people are giving excuses about why they don't vote or actual causal reasons for why they don't vote. It's really hard. As I mentioned before, it's one of the hardest things in social science to figure out why someone's not voting. But what we do know is this. If environmentalists show up, if they do start voting, politicians will trip over themselves to try to appeal to them. Because since 2016, since that moment in time, when only 2% of voters listed climate or the environment as their top priority, that number's gone up and up. It was 7% in the 2018 midterms. Heading into 2020, it had gotten up to 12%. And surprise, surprise, you started seeing all of these Democratic presidential candidates literally organize their entire campaigns around one issue, and that was climate change. I mean, politicians go where the votes are. I know it sounds cynical, but it's the simple arithmetic of how elections work. Like, either you go where the votes are or you don't get to be a politician anymore. And so it's incumbent upon us, we who care deeply about the environment, not to sit and wait for the perfect candidate, but to show up. And believe me, the politicians will follow, because there is nothing that motivates a politician more than the prospect of winning or losing an election. Believe me, if environmental voters show up, politicians will run after them to try to appeal to them.
Here in the United States, we have less than 40 days until